that he died to the life that's in the world. He died to a life that can be defined by what this world says about him. He died to the kind of life where he looked for evidence in this world of whether or not he possessed life. He died unto that life. We have fellowship with his sufferings because now through his death on the cross, we have now died to the word in the world about our life. We've died to the life in the world, to the word in the life that's in the world. We're dead to that life. That means there's nothing in the world that can come and define us. We don't live our lives walking around weighing out the good we see happen, the good we have, the bad we see happen, the bad we have. We don't walk around weighing those things out to judge whether or not we have life or not. We have fellowship with his sufferings. When he hung on the cross, he didn't look at the death he had and say, well, let's see if I possess life or not. He considered himself dead to the life that he could get from the world, and he considered himself alive to the life of God. And then he gave up the ghost. He laid down the life the world could give him. He said, nah, I don't want that life. There's a different life that's for me. That life came from the Father. And that's really what having faith in the resurrection is about. Our faith is in the resurrection. And I don't think we know what that means. That doesn't mean we have faith just in a historical event happening. Although a historical event happened. Okay? Our faith is in the resurrection. That means Jesus was raised from the dead. And we don't just think that Jesus was raised from the dead. We see Jesus and we're supposed to see our life in his life. We see that Jesus had a life. And the life he had conquered all sin. It conquered all death. It conquered all calamity, all tribulation. The life he had overcame everything. And then when we see him, we see his life is my life. And then what that tells us is that we have a life even in this earthen vessel. This earthen vessel that looks like it's subject to corruption. We possess a life in this earthen vessel that's already conquered all sin. You're not trying to conquer sin. The resurrection has told you you have a life that already conquered it. You're not trying to conquer death. You're not trying to bring forth enough life in this world where you could say, I've conquered death. You're not trying to conquer tribulation and calamity, man. The resurrection is the word about your life. We don't just say, the resurrection of Jesus, glory to God. No, we behold our life in his life, and we say, his life is my life. And then what happens is our hearts begin to be persuaded that we possess a life that's overcome all sin, all death, all tribulation, all calamity. And then we begin walking around in the earth like what Paul called newness of life. Not living from the place as if we're trying to get life. Not living from the place as if we're trying to attain to a good word about our life, but living from the place as if we already have life. It's a foregone conclusion, guys. It's a foregone conclusion that there's a good word about who you are. It's a foregone conclusion that there's a good word about your life. How do you know? Behold the resurrection. Behold your life in his life. Behold, his life is your life. You see, when Jesus hung on the cross, the reason why he could lay down that life is because he said something in his heart. When he looked at his life, he didn't think about the death he was dying, but he saw the life the Father had. And when he saw the life the Father had, and he said, the Father's life is my life. And so when he thought, can the cross conquer me? He said, can the cross conquer the Father? No. Can this sin and this death conquer me? He didn't think of himself there. He said, can sin and death conquer the Father? No. Can tribulation, can this calamity that's come upon me, can it conquer me? He didn't think about could it conquer him. He said, can it conquer the Father? Why? Because he said, the Father's life is my life. You see? And so that sets you free, man. He didn't have to fight and claw and scratch to have life. He said, the Father's life is my life. Now listen, man, from that foundation, you start walking around in what Paul called newness of life. Newness of, I already have life. He walked around, you start walking around in the newness that comes from knowing I already have life. That's what it means for our faith to be in the resurrection. It means that our faith is in the life we saw manifest there. It means we believe that the life that manifested in the resurrection, we believe that life is our life. That's what it means to have faith in the resurrection. You see, before, guys, our faith, what we thought about our life was that what the world showed us about our life was our life. And that caused us to be hopeless. It caused us to walk around in bondage to sin and death. All the time laboring and toiling, trying to attain to a good report. All the time laboring and toiling, trying to get enough life to manifest that we think we clothed ourselves with enough life that we can go to God and say, man, am I a son, am I a daughter? See, man, God come to persuade us of a different thing about the life we have. He come to turn our hearts away from looking into the world for the evidence of our life. See how you get set free? That's what it means to have fellowship with the sufferings of Jesus. That's what it means for your faith to be in the resurrection. We're not just believing in a historical event, although that historical event did happen. But we're believing that in that resurrection, it's a word about the life we possess now in this earthen vessel. So if you think you're struggling with some sin in your life, you don't look at yourself and say, am I ever going to overcome this sin? What you do is you see in the resurrection, Jesus overcame sin. His life is your life. You've already overcome sin. If you think you lack something that you need as it pertains to life and godliness, you don't look at your own life to determine if you have life or not. You behold your life in Jesus, and you see his life is your life. We don't hear that in church, do we? We come into church and we hear about, man, Jesus was raised from the dead. You better go off and clean up your act. Faith in the resurrection.